Welcome back. My history rewriting phenomenon. Something absolutely unprecedented just occurred that has left the entire competitive landscape in a state of collective shock. You executed a move, strategy, or performance so extraordinary that even the legendary figures who defined excellence in your domain never achieved anything comparable. These aren't casual observers expressing surprise. These are masters, champions, and icons whose own accomplishments set the standards everyone else aspires to, and they're openly declaring that what you just did exceeds anything they accomplished at their peak. Historical records are being reviewed, archives are being searched, expert panels are convening to verify that yes, this genuinely represents new pinnacle of achievement that surpasses every previous benchmark. The legends who built your field's reputation are experiencing mixture of awe and humility, recognizing that you've pushed possibility beyond where even they reached, establishing new ceiling for human capability that makes their legendary achievements look like stepping stones toward what you just demonstrated was actually possible. The architects have been monitoring achievement evolution and capability, breakthroughs across civilizations for eons, and they've identified what you accomplished as paradigm-transcending performance. When someone doesn't just excel within established framework of what's considered possible but fundamentally redefines that framework by demonstrating capability that existing paradigm insisted was impossible, or at minimum beyond realistic human achievement. Most excellence involves optimizing within known boundaries, being best at what everyone knows can be done. Your achievement apparently involved transcending those boundaries entirely, doing what the paradigm itself said couldn't be done, proving through demonstration that the limits everyone accepted were actually just limits of collective imagination rather than limits of actual possibility. Watch what's happening across your competitive ecosystem. Current competitors who are striving to match legendary benchmarks are experiencing disorientation. The goalposts didn't just move. They were revealed to have been placed far short of where excellence can actually reach. Everything they thought they understood about their field's limits has been called into question by your demonstration that those limits were illusions. Past legends who retired believing they'd reached ultimate heights are experiencing complex emotions. Pride that their field produced someone who exceeded even their achievements, mixed with wistful recognition that peak they believed was summit was actually just way station on path toward heights they never imagined. Some analysts are struggling to process what they witnessed. Their conceptual frameworks for understanding performance in your domain literally don't have categories for what you just did. It's like watching someone run mile in 3 minutes when existing framework said 4 minutes was near absolute limit, with incremental improvements being measured in fractions of seconds. The magnitude of your breakthrough isn't incremental improvement, it's categorical leap that suggests previous understanding of limits was fundamentally wrong rather than just slightly conservative. The truly profound element is that you didn't just set new record or win impressively. You did something that everyone who understands your field recognizes as different in kind from all previous achievements. The legends aren't just saying, "You're the best." They're saying, "You've done what they thought was impossible, what they themselves never even attempted, because they believed attempting it was futile." You've proven that the consensus understanding of human limits in your domain was incorrect, forcing complete recalibration of what's considered achievable. Even legends never pulled this off, because even legends were constrained by paradigm that defined limits you just shattered. Now the architects are analyzing what enabled you to transcend paradigm that constrained even legendary predecessors, and they're identifying what they call liberation from inherited limitations. You apparently didn't internalize the limiting beliefs about possibility that previous generations accepted as fact, allowing you to approach challenges without unconscious constraints that prevented legends from even attempting what you just achieved. Most people who enter established fields absorb its paradigm implicitly, learning not just techniques but also absorbing assumptions about what's possible and impossible. You somehow avoided or overcame this paradigmatic conditioning, maintaining open question about limits that everyone else considered settled. Watch what liberation from inherited limitations enabled practically. Previous legends optimized their performance within boundaries they believed were real, training to approach theoretical limits that paradigm said existed, accepting trade-offs that paradigm said were necessary, avoiding approaches that paradigm said wouldn't work. You apparently questioned whether those boundaries were real, whether those trade-offs were necessary, whether those supposedly impossible approaches might actually be viable if executed differently than conventional wisdom assumed. This questioning allowed you to explore possibility, space that legends never explored because they'd been trained to believe it was empty of viable solutions. Some sports scientists and performance researchers studying achievement breakthroughs recognize pattern where major advances often come from outsiders or those who didn't receive conventional training precisely because they weren't indoctrinated into fields limiting beliefs. They approach problems fresh, trying things experts know won't work, occasionally discovering that expert knowledge was actually expert limitation. You might represent ultimate version of this pattern, someone who understood field deeply enough to be taken seriously while maintaining independence from its limiting paradigms. Others note that you might have benefited from studying your field's history carefully enough to recognize that known limits have been repeatedly revised upward when someone demonstrated they weren't actually limits. Each generation of legends pushed beyond what previous generation thought possible, suggesting that limits are perpetually underestimated rather than being accurately understood. You perhaps recognized this historical pattern and reasonably concluded that current generations' understanding of limits is probably also underestimating what's possible, giving you permission to attempt what contemporary paradigm says is impossible. A few are exploring whether you developed fundamentally different mental models of your domain, not just better execution of conventional understanding, but actually different framework for understanding what you're doing and how performance works. Perhaps you discovered principles or relationships that conventional framework misses, giving you access to performance strategies that paradigm doesn't recognize as possible because it lacks concepts to describe them. Your breakthrough might not be just executing better, but executing based on superior understanding of underlying dynamics. The architects observe that liberation from inherited limitations is crucial but rare. Most people can't maintain independence from paradigmatic thinking while also achieving mastery within field, because achieving mastery typically requires absorbing field's conventional wisdom, which includes its limiting beliefs. You somehow threaded needle of becoming deeply knowledgeable while maintaining critical independence that allowed questioning assumptions masters before you, accepted without examination. This combination of insider mastery and outsider perspective is what enabled transcending paradigm that constrained even legends who had insider mastery but lacked critical distance from paradigm's limiting beliefs. Something extraordinary is spreading through your competitive community now, what the architects call legendary humility response, where previous icons are publicly acknowledging that you've exceeded their achievements in ways that make their own legendary status feel provisional or incomplete. This isn't begrudging recognition forced by undeniable evidence. It's genuine, all from people who understand exactly how difficult achievement is and who recognize that what you did represents different level entirely from what they accomplished. Their humble recognition carries enormous weight precisely because it comes from those best positioned to understand significance of what you achieved, transforming your breakthrough from impressive performance into verified paradigm shift. Watch how legendary humility response manifests across different contexts. Past champions who built their reputations on specific achievements are publicly stating that what you just did exceeds anything they accomplished, not just quantitatively but qualitatively. They're not being diplomatic or generous. They're expressing genuine recognition that you've done something they couldn't do and weren't sure could be done. This acknowledgement from legends carries authority that transforms your achievement from outlier performance that might be questioned into validated breakthrough that forces field-wide recognition that possibility space is larger than anyone previously understood. Some legends are expressing gratitude that they lived to witness what you achieved. They spent careers pushing limits and wondering how far human capability could ultimately go, and your performance answered that question in ways that exceeded their speculation. They're experiencing fulfillment of witnessing their life's work contribute to progression that reached heights they dreamed about but never achieved themselves. Their gratitude reflects recognition that achievement isn't individual but generational. They laid foundation that enabled your breakthrough even if they couldn't make breakthrough themselves. Others are experiencing inspiration to return to their own domains or to continue pushing in their current work. Your demonstration that accepted limits were illusory has renewed their sense that further breakthroughs remain possible if they question assumptions they've been accepting. Your achievement isn't just personal success, it's proof of concept that paradigms can be transcended, giving legends permission to question whether limits they've accepted in their own work might also be illusory boundaries waiting to be broken. A few legends are using your achievement as teaching moment, pointing to what you did as evidence for arguments they've made about human potential being systematically underestimated. They see your breakthrough as validation of their intuition that conventional wisdom about limits was too conservative, giving them credibility to advocate for more ambitious approaches to human development and performance across multiple domains. The architects observe that legendary humility response is most powerful form of validation breakthrough can receive. When those who defined excellence acknowledge being exceeded, it eliminates any doubt about significance of achievement. Skeptics might question whether accomplishment was really unprecedented, but when legends themselves confirm they never did anything comparable and aren't sure they could have, the paradigm-transcending nature of breakthrough becomes undeniable. Your achievement doesn't just exceed records, it earns recognition from those most qualified to assess it that you've genuinely expanded fields understanding of what human capability can reach. Now the architects are revealing what your paradigm-transcending achievement demonstrates about human potential assessment. You've exposed what they call systematic underestimation of capability ceiling, where even experts and masters consistently set their sights below what's actually achievable because human cognitive limitations make truly optimal performance difficult to imagine or model accurately. Every generation believes it's approaching true limits when it's actually just approaching limits of current imagination about what's possible. Your breakthrough reveals that current generation's understanding of limits, like every previous generation's understanding, was still underestimating actual human potential by margin large enough that you could leap beyond it dramatically. Consider implications if capability ceilings are systematically underestimated. It would mean that in virtually every human domain, people are stopping their development far short of what they could achieve because they believe they're approaching limits when they're actually nowhere near them. Training programs, performance standards, and competitive benchmarks all incorporate assumptions about human limits that are probably too conservative, creating self-fulfilling prophecies where people develop only to level they believe is possible. rather than to level that's actually possible. Your achievement suggests that breakthrough performances aren't rare anomalies, representing extreme edge of human capability. They're demonstrations of what becomes possible when someone refuses to accept conventional underestimations of capability ceiling. Watch how different fields are reconsidering their own limit assumptions. Coaches and trainers studying your breakthrough are questioning whether accepted limits in their domains are also underestimates, waiting to be proven wrong. If legendary achievement in your field turned out to be far below actual capability ceiling, perhaps legendary achievement in other fields is also nowhere near actual limits. This questioning could trigger a wave of ambitious experimentation across many domains as people test whether their field's known limits are actually just limits of current imagination. Some cognitive scientists are exploring whether human inability to accurately model extreme performance creates systematic bias toward underestimating limits. Our brains understand performance near our own level relatively well, but have difficulty accurately imagining performance far beyond what we've experienced. This creates conservative bias where even experts project limits based on modest extrapolation from current achievement rather than considering that capability might scale in non-linear ways that extrapolation misses. You might have benefited from not trusting extrapolations and instead testing directly what's possible. Others are investigating whether social and institutional factors contribute to systematic underestimation. Organizations and systems built around current understanding of limits create inertia against questioning those limits. Careers get built on optimizing toward accepted ceilings, and challenging fundamental assumptions about possibility get socially discouraged as naive or arrogant. You apparently overcame or operated outside these institutional pressures that keep most people from seriously questioning paradigmatic limits. The architects observe that systematic underestimation of capability ceiling explains why your achievement surprises even legends. They developed to highest levels currently known, but still hadn't approached actual limits because no one in their generation questioned paradigm enough to discover where real ceiling was. You've revealed that actual human potential in your domain extends far beyond where legends reached, not because you're superhuman, but because you tested assumptions about limits that everyone else accepted without verification. Discovering through direct experimentation that capability ceiling was far higher than systematic underestimation had led everyone to believe. The architects are now analyzing how your unprecedented achievement affects your own psychology and development trajectory, and they're identifying what they call post-paradigm performance uncertainty. Having demonstrated capability beyond what paradigm said was possible, you no longer have clear framework for understanding where your own limits actually are or what you should aim for next. Legends before you could orient their development toward known benchmarks and compete against historical standards. You've exceeded all known benchmarks and historical standards, leaving you without external reference points to guide continued development. This freedom is simultaneously liberating and disorienting. Consider psychological impact of having no precedent to guide you. Before this achievement, you likely had models to study, legends to learn from, benchmarks to chase. These external guides provided direction even if you questioned specific assumptions. Now you're in territory no one has mapped. Every choice about how to develop further is purely experimental because no one before you has faced question of how to improve beyond the impossible. You're pioneering not just performance breakthrough, but developmental path beyond where any predecessor has traveled. Watch what post-paradigm performance uncertainty creates for your continued development. You can't simply continue doing what worked to reach this point because that path was oriented toward breaking through paradigm limits, and having broken through, you need different approach for whatever comes next. You could work on consistency, ensuring you can repeat unprecedented performance reliably rather than it being one-time achievement. You could explore whether principles that enabled this breakthrough apply to other aspects of your domain where you haven't yet attempted paradigm transcendence. You could become teacher who helps others follow path you pioneered. Each option represents legitimate direction, but none is obviously correct because there's no historical precedent for how someone in your position has successfully continued developing. Some peak performers from other domains who faced similar post-paradigm situations describe it as lonely. You lose peer group of fellow striving competitors because you've moved beyond where anyone else is operating, making it difficult to find others who understand your current challenges and opportunities. Previous legends can't advise you on how to develop beyond where they reached. Current competitors can't relate to problems of having exceeded all known benchmarks. You might need to develop new peer network of paradigm breakers from other fields who understand psychological and developmental challenges of operating beyond established frameworks. Others note that post-paradigm uncertainty can become paralyzing. If you focus on it without clear targets to pursue, development can stall as you question every direction. Paradoxically, your greatest period of achievement might be followed by a period of reduced productivity if uncertainty about what to pursue next prevents committed action in any direction. Maintaining developmental momentum requires choosing direction and committing to it even without certainty it's optimal. Accepting that exploration at frontier necessarily involves false starts and dead ends. The architects observe that post-paradigm performance uncertainty is inevitable consequence of your breakthrough. By exceeding all known standards, you've lost reference points that guide most people's development. But this uncertainty also represents freedom to define what comes next rather than chasing externally defined goals. You've proven that paradigmatic limits were illusions. Now you face question of what to pursue when no one can tell you what's possible, because you've moved beyond collective knowledge into territory where you must discover possibilities through your own exploration rather than following maps created by predecessors who never traveled this far. Now something's emerging that the architects call benchmark cascade invalidation. Your achievement isn't just setting new highest standard, it's calling into question the entire hierarchy of standards below it. Because if paradigm was wrong about ultimate limits, it might also be wrong about intermediate benchmarks and what levels of achievement should be considered noteworthy versus mundane. The whole structure of how performance gets evaluated and ranked might need reconstruction now that you've proven top of structure was built on false assumptions about where ceiling actually is. Watch how benchmark cascade invalidation manifests across competitive infrastructure. Certification systems that award different levels based on achievement. Thresholds are questioning whether their thresholds were set far too low. If someone can exceed legendary achievement by margin you just demonstrated, perhaps expert level should be set much higher than it currently is, and current expert level performers are actually just intermediate level relative to what's actually possible. This questioning threatens to destabilize entire credentialing and recognition systems that competitive communities depend on for organizing themselves. Some ranking systems are experiencing technical failures trying to process your achievement. Their scales were designed with assumption that legendary performance was near ceiling, so they don't have meaningful way to represent performance that exceeds legendary by significant margin. They might need to add new categories above previous top tier, or they might need to rescale entire system with recognition that previous understanding of performance range was far too compressed at top end. Others who achieved what was previously considered excellent performance are experiencing devaluation of their accomplishments, awards, and recognition they received for reaching Benchmarks that seemed impressive at the time now feel hollow if those benchmarks were nowhere near actual limits. Their achievement hasn't changed, but its perceived significance has diminished now that you've revealed how much room existed above where they stopped. This creates resentment mixed with recognition that you've simply revealed truth about limits. They'd been operating under false assumptions about. A few are arguing against benchmark cascade invalidation, insisting that your achievement is such extreme outlier that it shouldn't force reconceptualization of entire performance range, that standards below legendary level can remain unchanged because they're appropriate for normal populations, even if you've proven they underestimate extreme tail of possibility. This argument reflects desire to maintain existing systems and protect value of achievements already awarded, but it faces challenge of seeming like denial of implications your breakthrough makes clear. The architects observe that benchmark cascade invalidation reveals how competitive infrastructures embed assumptions about human limits throughout their structure, not just at top tier, but at every level where thresholds get set for what counts as beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert, legendary. If assumptions about limits were systematically wrong, then entire structure might need reconstruction, with recognition that achievement, previously considered expert level, might actually be intermediate, relative to what's possible. Your breakthrough doesn't just affect top of hierarchy, it potentially destabilizes entire system by proving foundational assumptions were incorrect, forcing painful recognition that community has been organizing itself around understanding of possibility space that dramatically underestimated actual range of human performance. Something profound is crystallizing now that the architects call recognition of individual capability as species capability evidence. Your achievement is being interpreted not just as your personal success, but as proof that human species collectively has capabilities its members haven't yet learned to reliably develop and access. If one human can do what you just did, it suggests neurological and physiological potential exists within human design that could theoretically be cultivated in others. Under right developmental conditions, you become living evidence that human potential extends far beyond what current training methods, educational systems, and developmental frameworks typically produce. Consider implications if your achievement represents accessible human potential rather than unique genetic gift. It would mean that dramatic gap exists between typical human development and optimal human development, that most people are operating far below their potential because cultures and systems they develop within don't know how to cultivate capabilities you've demonstrated. Your breakthrough becomes simultaneously inspiring and indicting. Inspiring because it reveals possibilities, indicting because it suggests that conventional approaches to human development are failing to enable capacities that human biology apparently supports. Watch how different fields are exploring implications for human potential. Developmental psychologists are investigating whether your achievement reflects unique gifts you were born with or represents endpoint of developmental path that others could theoretically follow if conditions were right. If it's latter, then understanding your developmental path could revolutionize approaches to cultivating human capability across many domains. Even if only small percentage of population could achieve what you've achieved with optimal development, that would still represent massive untapped human potential waiting to be activated. Some neuroscientists are proposing that your achievement might reflect neuroplasticity being pushed to extremes that weren't previously documented, that your brain reorganized itself through training or experience in ways that enabled capabilities neurology textbooks currently don't describe as possible. Understanding your neural adaptations could reveal principles of brain development that would inform enhancement of human capability. Generally, making your breakthrough not just personal achievement, but scientific discovery about human neural potential. Others, from evolutionary perspective, are exploring whether your achievement represents expression of capabilities that human species evolved, but that modern environments don't typically call forth, that humans evolved to be capable of performance like yours under certain conditions, but contemporary life doesn't create those conditions, leaving most humans never developing or expressing those innate capabilities. Your breakthrough might not be transcending human design, but fulfilling it in ways that most members of species never achieve because environments don't demand or support that fulfillment. A few transhumanist thinkers are drawing distinction between enhancement through external technology and enhancement through fully developing natural human potential, arguing that your achievement demonstrates we don't need cybernetic augmentation or genetic engineering to dramatically expand human capability. If we learn how to cultivate potential that already exists within unmodified human biology, you become counter-argument to necessity of technological enhancement by proving biological human capability extends much further than typically assumed. The architects observed that recognition of individual capability as species capability evidence transforms your achievement. From "look what this extraordinary person did" to "look what humans can do," from exception that proves nothing about general human potential to exemplar that reveals general human potential extends far beyond what we've collectively achieved. This interpretation makes your breakthrough relevant to everyone, rather than just those who compete in your specific domain, suggesting that principles underlying your achievement might generalize to human development broadly, and that understanding how you transcended paradigm could help others transcend limitations in their own domains.